Yeah, it's from this one, no. Okay. Because he's wanting to do a presentation, so. All right.
What I'm going to suggest, this rather odd seating arrangement is a consequence of a meeting we held here earlier this morning, but it's going to be very odd for Daoud speaking here to all these empty tables, empty chairs and empty tables. So I wonder if I could persuade you to move down and sit what the sophisticates among us call cabaret-style arrangement.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yep.
You'll introduce people.
I'll introduce you. I'll welcome everyone, then hand over to. And what's the official title, Andrew? You're the president.
Andrew.
No, your
I'm
title.
the
convener
of the Friends of St. Andrews,
Jerusalem. Okay, lovely.
And Tiberius.
Yeah, and Tiberius, no less.
Yeah. Graham Brown.
Okay. Well, if I could just take this opportunity to welcome you all to St. Cuthbert's on behalf of the Kirk session. It's wonderful to have you here. And just as we're getting set up, just a little bit about where we're gathered. We're gathered on the oldest Christian site in Edinburgh, dating back 1,400 years to when there was no Scotland and England. We would have been in the kingdom of Northumbria as we gathered at the moment. More recently in history, St. Cuthbert's was instrumental in setting up St. Andrew's, Jerusalem, when the minister at the time had a vision, and that vision was delivered. If you get a chance, do drop into our memorial chapel at the back of the church, where you'll see a mosaic golden window apse. And that was the inspiration for the gold of Jerusalem that links the two churches. Anyway, we're absolutely delighted to have you here, but most importantly of all, we're delighted to have Daoud with us as well. He will shortly be sharing with us all about the Tent of Nations, and I know many of you chatting with you are really passionate about the amazing work that he is doing. But meanwhile now, I'd like to hand over to my friend and colleague, the convener of the Friends of St. Andrews and Tiberius, Andrew McClellan.
Thank you to Peter Sutton and to the St. Cuthbert's people for having us here today. I'm welcoming you on behalf of the Society of Friends of St. Andrews, Jerusalem and Tiberius. If you've no idea who they are, then before you leave, you'll be a member. The Society exists to support the work of the Church of Scotland congregation in Jerusalem and Tiberius, its ministers, and in particular the partner organisations with whom the Church of Scotland and we are in relationship. Chief among these, that's the wrong thing to say, but at the very top of it's very good that the Tent of Nations is among those with whom we're in close relationship, and of course it's a thrill to have Daoud Nassar here with us in Edinburgh and to spend time with the Friends of St. Andrews, Jerusalem and Tiberius. But before that, we're going to hear for a few minutes from John Howard. John Howard was, for quite some time, the representative of the Methodist Church in Britain in Jerusalem. And while he was living there and working there, he had very close associations with the Church of Scotland congregation at Jerusalem, St. Andrews, Jerusalem. And John is looking after Daoud while he's here in Britain and has gone to some trouble to make sure Daoud was here in time today. I'm grateful for that. And if John is here, but I don't see, oh yes, if John's here, I can now invite John to speak to us about briefly about his own time, and then I'll invite Daoud up after that.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be here. I would say it's good to drive in the centre of Edinburgh for the first time, but I wouldn't be telling the truth. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share with you on this occasion, and I do want to, in a sense, pay tribute to the work of the Church of Scotland in the land we call holy. As a Methodist, I was asked to represent the Methodist Church in Israel-Palestine. We've had a partnership for many years with the Methodist Church of the United States. We call it the United Methodist Church. And back in 2002, when the Jerusalem church leaders made their appeal for the Christian community across the world to come and see, go and tell, Methodism's response was to say, well, we've never had any churches in that area. What we can do is to work together with the World Methodist Council in order to establish a presence that we call the Methodist Liaison Office. And so we've had what we call an office, but in reality, it's individuals working in different capacities within the Holy Land. I was asked to be the first of the British Methodist ministers to share in this role. And I think part of the sign of the level of cooperation that exists between the Church of Scotland and the Methodist Church is, in a sense, the fact that we were able to work together on this piece of work because St Andrew's in Jerusalem has ongoing and long-standing relationships with the authorities in Israel. It has been possible for myself and for my successors in that role to receive their visas through the Church of Scotland. And so we have what's often called the clergy visas or the A3 visas, which allow us to stay and work as clergy. That's been so helpful to the Methodist Church in establishing the liaison office and the work that we do, which is now developing in quite a number of different directions. From the point of view of achieving that work, I want to say publicly how much I appreciate it, and I know that my colleagues within the Methodist Church also very much appreciate that. At the same time, I think it's fair to say that over the years that's also been very helpful to the sustaining work at St Andrew's in Jerusalem and indeed in Tiberias as well. I was there when Porrick Raymond was the minister, and many of you will remember Porrick. And we had a very good and fruitful relationship between the different clergy who were ecumenical associates with St Andrew's and with Porrick himself and the work that he was involved in. But when he left, there was quite a considerable period of time when there weren't any clergy there. And so the ecumenical associates were able to take the role and preach every Sunday and provide the kind of pastoral support for the congregation and for the church that could be offered in those circumstances. I say that because it's been a partnership, and I think that's what's important. We've been able to work together as the Methodist Church and as the Church of Scotland with different context, and as much as you have the work, both in Tiberias and in Jerusalem, and indeed in Jaffa as well. And it's been possible, for example, for Methodist, myself and other Methodists who've been in the office to take assemblies over in Jaffa, for example, as one thing, or to cover over in Tiberias. We've even, on occasions, great sacrifice to ourselves, had the hospitality of the Scots Hotel as well. But, you know, you've got to put up with the difficult things in life sometimes, don't you? You know. So I think I'm glad to have this opportunity to express that sense of the partnership that has existed. And I think especially on the ground, and I think Stuart might continue to comment on that in relation to my colleague Angelina, who has been the Methodist mission partner in Bethlehem over the last little while. We are actually at a stage now of looking ahead. Angelina has finished her time and she's now back in this country, in fact, doing talks in different places. A new minister has been appointed to continue this work, David Hardman, and we look forward to that relationship continuing and developing in new ways as we can work together as two churches, but particularly focused in the individuals who take up these offices in these particular places. So, once again, thank you for the work that you have done and the support that has given to the Methodist Church through St Andrews and through the individuals who have been a part of that, Ian and Kenny and so on. We greatly appreciate it within the Methodist Church and continue to wish you well for your work within Jerusalem, Tiberias, and indeed Jaffa. Thank you.
Will I proceed?
Yes.
Thank you, John. When I was a parish minister 30, 40 years ago, very near here, just round the corner from here, one Sunday morning, a young woman appeared in church who was a student. And she said to me that she was in Edinburgh doing some advanced course in physiotherapy. Being very good at conversation, I said, "Where do you come from?" And she said, "I come from Bethlehem." And in those days, my contacts with that part of the world were nil. And I was really excited that there should be somebody from Bethlehem worshipping with us. And she came regularly to St Andrews and St George's, as it was in those days. Her name was Amal. Some of you will have met Amal because Amal lives in the Tent of Nations. To other people, Amal is known as Daoud Nassar's sister. But to me, Daoud Nassar is Amal's brother. And to all of us, Daoud Nassar is the incarnation of the Tent of Nations. If you know the Tent of Nations, you know you're in for a treat. If you don't know the Tent of Nations, you're in for an inspiration. So grateful to Daoud for taking time from all the excitements of being at the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland, taking time to be with us today, and even more for bringing Jehan with you to brighten up our day. If you've been or if you haven't been, you'll remember for the rest of your life the words on the stone outside the Tent of Nations in what used to be a pathway, and you now have to clamber over rocks and stones and all sorts of blockades, but it still says, "We refuse to be enemies." Daoud, it's a joy for us to have you. You'll talk to us for a while, and then we'll have an opportunity for comments and questions. I'll explain how that will happen when it comes, because I'll explain how it happens when it comes. Please welcome Daoud Nassar.
Well, thank you so much. For having us here. Yeah, maybe. It's better. So it's an honor for us to be here, and thank you so much for inviting us to be with you and also to attend the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. I am Amal's brother. And Amal means hope. And hope is very much needed in our area of the world because, as you know, the situation, and especially the political situation, is very tough in our area. And many people are coming and visiting the Holy Land, but they are not meeting the living stones of the country. So probably 3 to 5 million tourists are coming to visit the Holy Land, and most of them are Christian groups supposed to walk where Jesus walked, but they end up driving where Jesus used to walk. So they see places from the window of their buses. And then when they come to the Palestinian areas, most of them are coming just to see the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem, which is very important. So they drive through the wall that the Israelis built as a separation wall, and then they drive close to the Church of Nativity. They get out of their buses, get into the church, and then the guide is looking for a quiet area to tell the story. And after that, the group will sing a Christmas song, even at Easter time, and then get out of the church, visit a souvenir shop, go back to Jerusalem or back home without knowing how we live as Palestinians. What are our challenges there? And many come and go without knowing that even among Palestinians are also Christians. Many people keep asking us, how did you become a Christian? When did your family convert? And the easiest answer to say, 2,000 years ago. We exported Christianity from there. Now, we are facing as Palestinians, and especially now after 1967 with the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, just let me ask this question: how many people visited the country? Yeah. And the Tent of Nations? Yes, wonderful, yeah. It's good. We are living under a difficult political reality, and our major obstacle today is land confiscation, building Israeli settlements, and expanding the existing ones. And we as a family are affected by land confiscation like many other Palestinian families. We own a piece of land located southwest of Bethlehem on a hilltop, which is about 6-7 miles away from Bethlehem. And the land is located today in a center of 5 Israeli Jewish settlements. And maybe the word settlement is wrong. They are growing to become cities. The biggest one has maybe 70,000 people, according to the Israeli statistics. And as you know, most of those settlements are built in the 80s. Israelis built them in the 80s, which means a generation of children was born there, grew up, got married, and have their own children. And this is making it impossible for us as Palestinians one day to become independent. And most of the settlements are built according to a long-term plan to divide the Palestinian territories into small areas that are disconnected from one another in order to make it impossible for us also economically and geographically to be independent. So we are in that context. And as maybe some of you know, that after the peace agreements, the Palestinian territories were divided into 3 areas, 3 zones, A, B, and C. And where the farm is located is Area C, which means totally under Israeli civil and military control. Which means on the ground today as Palestinians, we are not controlling our own land, we are not controlling our own resources, and we are not in charge of our own borders, which will make it impossible for us to become independent. And we do not have that much freedom of movement. Jerusalem is about 7 kilometers, 8 kilometers away from Bethlehem, but we as Palestinians are not allowed to go to Jerusalem without having a permit. And most of the time, we got it only at Christmas time or Easter time, so we try to go to Jerusalem within the time frame that is given to us. Even traveling outside the country, we cannot do it through the airport, but we have to go the longer trip to Amman. So the 4 years or a 4 hours trip to Europe or 5 hours trip, for us Palestinians, it takes at least 2 days. So we are in that context. And we as a family, as many other Palestinian families, are affected by land confiscation. As I said before, we own this farm southwest of Bethlehem, bought by my grandfather more than 100 years ago during the Ottoman period. He did at that time 2 things that were unusual. He registered the land. It was unusual during the Ottoman period to register land because the Palestinians did not want to pay property taxes to their occupiers, and papers at that time were not important according to our tradition. It's like biblical tradition with a handshake. You could buy a mountain. So why do you need a signature? Why do you need a paper? But my grandfather did it the right way, so he registered the land. We got papers from the Ottomans, and then we kept re-registering the land during the British, the Jordanians, and even documentations from the Israelis after 1967. For the land that was not registered at that time, the Ottomans said, you are the user of the land, but not the owner. So if you leave your land not cultivated continuously for more than 3 years, it becomes state land. So those laws are being implemented by the Israeli authorities after 1967. They started taking area photographs, and they started declaring land as state land, leaving the burden on the Palestinians to prove ownership. Now, many Palestinians could not prove their title to their land on a piece of paper. They started saying, this is the land that I got from my parents, from my grandparents. But then the Israelis started to apply the second Ottoman law. Yes, but you did not use it. And what is not used is becoming state land. Of course, this is unjust and illegal according to the international law. So in our case, we have the documents, and the other unusual thing the family did, they lived on the farm in a cave. Many of you who came to visit the farm, they saw the cave where the family used to live. My grandfather said, we belong to the ground. We don't need to build a house on the farm. We live in the ground. And in this tradition, my father and uncle grew up, continued the journey of their parents until they passed away. And we, the 3rd and the 4th generation, grew up with the same way, connected with the land. I was not born in a cave or grew up in a cave, but connected with the land. Now, in 1991, the Israeli authorities declared our farm as state land. The farm is in the center of 5 settlements, and they want to confiscate it, to build a new settlement, to connect the settlements together, but also to control the Palestinian village, which is located in the valley from all sides. So we are the only family who went to the court because we have the title for the land. And we thought with one session we will finish the case because we have the title, we have the papers. There was a shock among the Israelis to see documents, but instead of closing the case as we were hoping for, they postponed it. And because of our location, they started to make it difficult for us to prove ownership. One obstacle after the other. One time they said, you have papers, but maybe the papers that you have are not for this specific area. So we had to prove the opposite. Now, it was not so easy to prove the opposite. How can we prove that the papers are in that right location? We are lucky that we have an old land survey that goes back to 1924. We presented the land survey, the map, and the location, the documents. Another shock. Where did you get this from? Then they started arguing, yes, but this map was done by hand in 1924. Of course, there was no computer. Now we need new one. We have to present a new one made with GPS coordinates. Now, making a new one, we had to pay $7,000. And in order for a land survey to be recognized by the court, it should be signed by all neighbors. In 1924, there were maybe 4 families, 4 people, but now half of the village probably. So it was hard for us to find the neighbors. We were given 45 days time to do it. To make the story short, we managed to do it, we presented, and then they said, now we need eyewitnesses to bring to the court. And one time we brought about 50 people. We were standing outside the court for 5 hours waiting to give the witness, and then they said to us, we have no time to talk to you today, come next week. So one obstacle after the other, we spent 12 years in front of the military court. And after 12 years, our lawyer received the facts the family does not have enough proofs of ownership. So we said, this is not right. This is unjust. We did not give up there. We brought this case to the highest court in Israel, the Supreme Court. Palestinian lawyers from the West Bank cannot represent us in front of the Supreme Court. So we had to hire a Palestinian lawyer from Jerusalem who is still representing us until today. So we keep knocking at the door for justice, keep pushing for justice. So in 2007, the Supreme Court could not say that we have nothing, but instead of ruling for our favor, they sent this case back to the military authorities. And they demanded that we should re-register our own land in order to be recognized as a private property in an area that is fully controlled by Israel. So we thought we are at the end of this process, so we will succeed soon. So in 2007, we started with the re-registration, but then after a couple of postponements, they said that we did not submit enough documents, so we had to start the new process again. Of course, when we start a new process, like a registration process, so we have to survey the land again, and then pay all the fees, collect all signatures of our neighbors to prove that we are existing. But then they say, you need to do it again. So we did it the second time in 2013, and then they claimed that they lost our file. And then in 2015, we started the third time, and until now, we are still in that process. So on Monday, the 15th of May, we had a court session at the military court. It was a long session. We were able to bring our witnesses, neighbors that could prove that we are existing there. So some of them were heard, and then they postponed the session until the 6th of September. Of course, time is not on our side because of what is happening now in Israel with the passing new laws that that will make it more difficult for us, and especially if we won't be able to get this case in front of the Supreme Court. So 32 years we are in a legal battle with the Israeli authorities, but we did not give up. We are still there. We did not lose any part of the land, which makes it one of the unique cases that are still in court since 1991. But we faced also many challenges from the Israeli settlers that are around us in the settlements, who tried with physical pressure to move us out. So they came and attacked us, and especially between 1991 and 2002, they cut our trees, they threatened us with guns, they tried to build roads on our land that we managed to stop by court. Always when they did something, we responded. We went to the Israeli courts to try to stop them. And one time after we stopped them from digging a road, they got very angry, the settlers, and they destroyed 250 olive trees from our farm. Now, an olive tree for a Palestinian is it's like a holy tree. But 3 weeks later, we managed to plant new trees sponsored by a Jewish organization from England called European Jews for Just Peace in Palestine, who heard about our story, and they decided to sponsor 250 olive trees, and they came and planted them. So this was for us a sign of hope that we are not alone in our struggle for justice. So we had also many, many other destructions, like one time the army destroyed more than 1,500 fruit trees 10 days before the apricot harvest. It was actually done on the 19th of May, 2014. We did not stop there. We repaired the land, we planted new trees, and many people came and helped in sponsoring and planting trees. Among them was American Jewish group, who stayed with us for a week, helped in planting trees, were inspired by our story, went back home and established an organization called the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. And for us, it was the comfort that out of a negative and difficult story, something positive was born. You know, sometimes we don't understand that the sufferings that we have to go through became a blessing for other people, you know. So we never left alone there. This is something that we always have to remember, you know. So with physical pressure, even we did not give up. Then they tried to tempt us to sell the land, and the last offer was a blank check. But our answer was, what we inherited, we cannot sell. A gift that we received cannot be sold. You know. And today, many of you came to visit the farm. You saw the road is blocked there. The main access to the property is blocked. They are trying to isolate us more and more, squeeze us between the settlements. They claim always the road is blocked because of security purposes. But this has nothing to do with security. This is in order to make life more difficult for us and other farmers, in order to leave the land abandoned. And by taking aerial photographs, they could prove the land is not being cultivated. And what is not cultivated is being declared as state land. The second obstacle we are facing is the building of a new school there, new religious school. Now, you know, in our area, religions are being abused, not only by Jews, by Christians, and by Muslims. Some people are trying to make God as a tribal God. So we are afraid that this school might be visited by radical settlers who come with the ideology, this is the land that God gave to us. So they might attack us on the farm, and the road will continue to be closed permanently for us. Now the third obstacle is actually the wall. Many of you came to visit the country and they saw the wall. We believe with walls no one can achieve peace. With walls we will achieve more hatred, more bitterness, and we create more enemies. But also the problem with the wall for us is that the wall is not being built at the border between the West Bank and Israel in order to claim it for security. You know, the wall is going deep into Palestinian areas, and in many places it is separating Palestinians from Palestinians and Palestinians from their own land. So when the wall is finished in our area, southwest of Bethlehem, the farm will be on the Israeli side of the wall, which means the wall will disconnect us from going the 6 miles to Bethlehem. 6 miles to Bethlehem. Yeah? And this situation might force many Palestinian landowners to give up and leave. On the ground, we have no access to running water, no electricity, and no building permit. In order to make life more difficult for us, to voluntarily leave, and we have so far 28 demolition orders. And those demolition orders, we do not receive them given to us by hand or sent to us by mail. We find them on the property if we are lucky. They come and put a demolition order on a tree or on a fence. We have to find it and appeal against it legally. And if we won't do so, or if we fail to do so, they might come, the bulldozers might come, demolish the structure, and also later on will send us the bill. So, no building permit, no electricity, no running water, in order to make it difficult for us to exist there. Of course, what I'm telling you now, this is the Palestinian story. It's not only our family story. This is the story of many Palestinians who are in the same or even more difficult situation. So what to do when people are pushed to the corner, when they have no hope for the future, when they are provoked by violence, no perspectives, nothing to look forward to it. I always say people usually react with three options. The first normal response to that situation will be also violence. And we said to ourselves, with violence, people will create more violence. It will never be our way. We came to the second normal reaction, which is to sit down and cry and wait for a political savior to come and help. We said sitting down and crying won't change our reality. We could do it years and years and nothing with no outcome. And it is dangerous to represent ourselves as victims. Then we were left with the last option, which is to run away, to leave. And who is leaving? The best educated Palestinians. And among the people that are leaving are the Palestinians and Christians. If you want to talk about the Palestinian Christian presence in the Holy Land, we are talking about, in numbers, less than 1% from the whole population. Which means that one day the Holy Land will become like a museum, just visited by international Christian groups, running from one dead stone to another. Of course, we always say the tomb is empty, nothing to look for. But where are the living stones that could represent this country? And that's why we said no to this last option. We said we need to face our challenges, but in a different way. In a different way, we mean in a non-violent way. And when we said in a non-violent way, of course, because we might not see the outcome of our work immediately, so we had to fix ourselves to believe that this is the only way. And that's why, and before we started what we call it now the fourth way, we said 4 things that became our principle. The first thing we said, we refuse to be victims. It was important to move ourselves out of the victim mentality in order to start acting instead of reacting, and to start acting in a different way. Secondly, we said we refuse to hate, and no one can force us to hate. Easy said, very difficult to practice, and we are challenged by that on a daily basis. But with hatred, people would destroy themselves from within. And we believe that all people are created in the image of God, and they are not created to hate one another. In every human being, including what we might call an enemy, there is something good and something bad. So the good thing we want to respect, but the bad thing we don't want to accept. We have to stand up for our rights and tell the other what you are doing is not right, it's unjust. Thirdly, we said we are acting differently, not because it's a weakness or a strategy. No, it is based on our Christian values. So it is very important to read in the Bible and to practice. And sometimes reading is easier, but practicing is the most difficult. But with our faith, we said our faith is the center of this way of nonviolent resistance. And fourthly, we said we are people who believe in justice. Although the way for justice is too difficult, but one day we will see the sun of justice rising again. With those 4 principles, we got very motivated, and we stood up and we started a new way of resistance. We started a non-violent, in a creative, in a constructive way. And our 4th way is called we refuse to be enemies. And this is the stone that is at the entrance of our farm. We refuse to be an enemy is not a passive but an active way of nonviolent resistance. And we started to call the farm the Tent of Nations. And immediately we managed to stand up, and we started to say, we are able to make a difference even in our very difficult situation. And we became also more creative. We didn't accept that we do not have any utilities there, but we started thinking about how we can solve those problems in a different way, in a creative way. So for electricity, we installed a solar power system. No electricity on the farm, we have solar power system. No running water on the farm, we started collecting rainwater inside systems. No building on the ground is allowed. We started building under the ground. We started renovating caves, existing caves. And for us, it's not just about that. It's about proving to ourselves and showing other people that things are possible. Even in a very difficult political reality, people can make a difference. So our message to people, when you face challenges, do not sit down, do not cry, and do not become a victim. Stand up and act. And while you're acting positively and differently, you empower yourself and you will empower other people, not through telling them what to do, but through doing what you are doing. And this is the message that we are trying to get out through the Tent of Nations. We started inviting people to the farm to motivate them and to send them back home with a message of hope, even in a hopeless situation. We do activities like tree planting. We host children's summer camp activities for local children. Our children are traumatized, growing up in a very difficult political reality. So we try to bring them out of their communities, try to motivate them on the farm through creativity, like paintings, mosaic, music, theater. Because we want the children to focus on the positives and believe in themselves that they are able to make a difference. We have, until Corona time, a women empowerment project run by my wife, Jihan. We started this project for women in the village who do not have chances for education. It's a conservative Muslim village, and the idea is to give those women an opportunity to get out of their homes, to be motivated, to get with one another, meet one another, but also to empower each other. And through creativity, they can make a difference. Believing in themselves, we are able to shape our future. We have harvest camps, so we host groups, locals and internationals. We have in June the apricot harvest, in July the almond, August the grapes, the figs in September, and end of October we have the olive harvest. And you've been there for 1 week helping, right? And it was in August. Yes, exactly. Through the presence of many people that heard this story and came to visit, attacks on the farm from Israeli settlers had stopped since 2002. And that's why I always say, when you come to the Holy Land, please stop by the Tent of Nations. Even if you have only 10 minutes time to come and visit, it's not enough, but better than nothing. Yeah? Through the presence of the people there, no more attacks on us from the Israeli settlers. Of course, our situation will get more difficult when the farm is becoming more isolated after they finish building the wall. And that's why our aim nowadays is how to make the farm totally self-sufficient in terms of energy and water, wastewater treatment. We want to install small wind turbines. So we are thinking about the know-how and how we can get that in order to be 100% independent in terms of energy. We want to recycle the gray water to be used for irrigation. We want to filter, to purify the rainwater to be used for drinking. And why not to use biogas out of the compost to be used as a cooking gas, you know? So out of our needs, we started to be more creative. And the aim on the long run is actually to establish an educational environmental center on the farm. Because environmental education is not a big theme for our children at school. So we want to bring people to the farm and try to teach them by doing about sustainability, organic farming, alternative energy, community building, and non-violent way of resistance in action. And of course, when you come, we can also celebrate a church service in the Olive Grove Chapel. I always say, politically, it's very hard there, and especially with this new government. We are facing many challenges, also legal challenges. The postponement of our court cases is not for our favor. They're just like delaying and delaying until they find maybe another way of taking the land. We are facing also challenges to keep the farm, to sustain it, to develop agriculture, but still we are the people of hope. We are not allowed to stop where the road is blocked and say this is the reality. No, we know that the suffering, like the cross was not the end of the story. The cross was a path into a new situation. So even if we are still in this very dark tunnel, but the candle of hope is still burning, that will show us how to get out. So we should follow a vision, walk in small steps. Even if we fall down, we stand up again, and we'll continue our journey for justice, but always with faith, with love, and hope. And this is the foundation of the work that we are doing. I put a full stop here, and thank you so much.
Some questions and comments?
Yes, please. Yeah, if there is a question. Thank you. Thank you.
The world needs to know what real Palestinians are like. And the world needs to know what real Christians are like. With time, we have some time for some comments or questions to Daoud. You'll need to have a big voice, but I'll do my best. I wear two hearing aids, so I'll not hear a word you're saying anyway. But I know Daoud would be pleased to engage with comments and questions. Yep.
The farm is about
You keep
42 hectares.
The question is, how big is the farm?
The farm is about 42 hectares, located on a hilltop. Of course, it's not like flat land. It's challenging also for agriculture, but the soil is very rich. It keeps the humidity. So, but we cannot farm there like doing vegetables and many fruit trees, because it all depends on rainwater. So we are planting trees that do not need a lot of water, like olives, grapes, almonds, figs.
Comments, questions?
Daoud, I was there in 2010 with the EAPPI Bethlehem team.
Yes.
And at that time, I came back the following year with my wife. At that time, there were a few of the settlers in the nearest settlement that overlooks you who were friendly and supportive. Are they still there?
You hear? There's a question about the relationship with settlers 15 years ago nearby and settlers nearby today.
Well, there are different groups of settlers that are living in our area. One group is the ultra-Orthodox. They are not dealing with Palestinians. They live in illegal settlements, but they have no clashes with Palestinians. Secondly, we have the group that we call them the economical settlers, who are living in the settlements because it's cheaper, and many are not paying taxes, so they have a nice area to live on and then go to Jerusalem and come back in the evening. It's like living place, yeah. And then the third group, we have the new immigrants that are mostly coming from Eastern Europe and know nothing about the situation. So they bring them into the settlements, and they are very happy to have a shelter coming from a poor area or, out of war areas, And then we have the fourth group, which we call them the ideological settlers, that come with the ideology by abusing religion for political purposes and claiming this is the land that God gave to us. So the four groups are represented in our area. And the story that you mentioned was about a couple who came to the farm, came down from the settlement, and the gate was open. And then they were curious to know what is going on at the Tent of Nations, And when people come to the farm and eager to learn, anybody is welcome. But I can't talk with anyone who is pointing a gun at me. So those people just wanted to know what is happening there. And then the lady said, we see that many groups are coming to visit you. So on a yearly basis, about 10,000 people come to visit the farm. What are they doing here? Why they are coming here? Why there is no churches here, nothing holy. I said, well, every stone in the Holy Land is holy, has a story to tell. And she said, we are neighbors. We could live together. And then I realized that they knew nothing about the political reality. I said, yes, but good neighbors must be treated equally. She said, I agree with you, but why you say that? I said, well, good neighbors must be treated equally, but there are many exceptions here. You have a swimming pool in the settlement or more, and I am not allowed to have drinking water on my land. She said, no, I don't believe it. This is not true. I said, well, this is how we live the situation here. And the water that you are using for your swimming pool is actually my drinking water. And then I continued, you are allowed to build a house on land that does not belong to you, and I am not allowed to have a tent on my land that I own. I didn't say 10 or 7,000 years ago, but I said 100 years ago. She said, no, I don't believe it. This is not true. I said, well, I actually tell you, when you go back home, try to educate yourself. Try to ask about the situation. But she was confused. They heard a different story. So they went back, and then they came to visit again 3 weeks later. And this lady said, I asked about my house, and somebody in the settlement told her that her house, or the land where her house is, was not confiscated from a Palestinian, but was bought from a Palestinian. I don't know, maybe it's true. But the main thing, she started to raise questions. She heard a different story. She put a face to the story. She started seeing the other not as an enemy, as a person, as a human being. And they came, to your question, a couple of times to visit, and she said, she was always saying, I am telling my friends about you, about your situation. She was educating people. This was very good from her. It's not just she decided to listen to the story and that's it, but she kept telling the story. And out of a sudden, they did not come back, and I assume they left the settlement because they maybe were facing challenges to stay there.
I think we nearly have to finish. One more question, comment? Okay, we're done.
Thank you so much.
A word of thanks and then a word of prayer. The word of thanks, of course, is to, what's your name? Amal's brother. To Daoud, and to Jihan for being with us, and to John Howard. About a month or so ago, with 2 or 3 other people who were here, I was in the company of a dissident Israeli former diplomat called Alon Leal, and I was very impressed with the courage with which he was able to criticise his own government. So impressed that I wanted to give him something, and I didn't have anything to give him. And then I realised that I was wearing a Church of Scotland tie. So what I did was I took my Church of Scotland tie off and I presented it to him. And then I bought a new Church of Scotland tie, which I'm wearing for the first time today, and which I'm going to take off and give to Daoud as a little gift for your time.
Thank you so much. It's an honor for me. Thank you.
It has been exactly what we all thought it was going to be. We so much appreciate. Would you
Excuse me, just saying one thing. Daoud and I brought a number of booklets and leaflets with us, and I've got them in a box at the back. If you'd like to have a booklet about Tentor Nations, we've got some here. You're welcome to have them. Sorry to interrupt.
I was sure he was going to come up and say, could I have a tie as well, please? You'll also get leaflets about the Friends of St Andrews, Jerusalem and Tiberias on the way out from Carol Miller, who's wearing a pink jacket, and you're not allowed out without getting a leaflet from her. Thank you very much to you also for coming. So thanks to Daoud and Jehan, thanks to John, and thanks to all those who helped us with today, and thank you for coming. You clap, I'll say a prayer, and then we're done. And now a word of prayer. Into the hands of God, we commit the Tent of Nations and the Nassar family. Into the hands of God, we commit the Christians in the Holy Land, the Palestinian people, and all the people of that land. And into the hands of God we commit ourselves and our consciences and our words and our actions to be used as instrument of God's peace. Amen. Thank you for coming.